Let's talk
Exactly.
about this new gender-neutral word that has been created to describe Latino people. We had Latinx or Latinxes. That was the previous word that was tried to be employed, and it got mocked. And Latin people seem to absolutely hate it. The Hispanic community did not embrace that word at all. Now they've come up with a new one called Latine. Do you think this one is going to be embraced if they replace the X with an E?
No. I mean, see, the big problem is that, and this is being pushed by the media, the big problem that the media has is that they have an elitist problem and they have an ideology problem. And often those two things mix. And so what we're seeing here is the media pushing something that adheres to the ideology, right? Makes the non-conforming, gender non-conforming people feel comfortable, when in reality, it makes 99% of the population squirm. Like, this is ridiculous, it's absurd, and no one asked for it except for the ideologues. So this is rightfully being mocked, just like Latinx was rightfully being mocked. And honestly, anybody who is saying Latinx or even saying this, what they're trying to do is signal to each other. You know, they're letting them know, I'm part of the tribe. I know the language, I know the lingo. And that's how you spot these people.
Well, yes, and I think it's going to be the same thing. It will be some very affluent white folk who'll be using this term, and everyone else will continue to mock it. Now, let's talk about voter ID. It's incredible to me that this is such a ongoing issue in the US. You would just think it would be obvious for everyone to have ID if they're going to participate in the electoral process. You need ID to pretty much do anything these days. The Republicans have issued new legislation to help combat voter fraud in the lead up to the presidential election.
And so what we're going to do is introduce legislation to require that every single person who registers to vote in a federal election must prove that they're an American citizen first. You have to prove it. That will be a new part of the federal law, and a very important one. Our bill will establish new safeguards. It'll put us on par, by the way, with virtually every other democracy around the world that also prohibits non-citizen voting.
Adam, as usual, the response to this has been somewhat demented from some in the media, some of the pundits. All they see here is racism and voter suppression, that, you know, non-citizen voting isn't an issue. I mean, if it isn't an issue, then what's the problem with having voter ID? And they're also claiming that anybody who thinks this is an issue is a conspiracy theorist. Is that how you see it?
No, not at all. And calling us conspiracy theorists is the gaslighting, because in New York City, they just lost an appeal to allow non-citizens to vote. Mayor Eric Adams and the city council pushed for non-citizens to vote within New York City. Now, to be specific, they wanted permanent residents, right? So they're here legally. However, voting is for citizens, right? That is our right. That's one of the things that makes it special about being a US citizen. You have the right to have your voice heard when it comes to picking your representative. And what they tried to do was bogart our system, violate the Constitution, which the appellate court said this is unconstitutional. They tried to violate it so they can get 800,000 more people as voters within New York City. And if that was to go through, then you would have seen ripples throughout other major cities to push for the same thing. So thankfully, in this circumstance, the court clearly saw that this is unconstitutional. If you're not a citizen of the country, you should not be able to vote. But when people say, oh, this is not a non-issue whatsoever, no one's actually trying to vote. First off, this is the most common sense thing in the world. If you are a citizen, then you should be able to vote. If you're a non-citizen, you should not be able to vote. And being able to prove it is the most common sense thing all around the world, especially in Western democracies.